What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to share a couple of tips for those of you who are starting your first year pharmacy residency. For those of you guys who are watching shortly after this video is released, congrats. You guys are probably 1 to 3 weeks into your residency. You guys are excited and you're ready to work. But I wanted to share a couple of tips to just, quick tips. It's not meant to be formal or anything. I want to do a more formal thing of all the things that you should probably be thinking about. These are just some quick things that come to mind, and I wanted to share sooner rather than later. And also because I'm going to be traveling for a couple of weeks, I need to pre-record some content. Anyways, I have 4 things I wanted to quickly share with you all, and just go down the list. So the first thing I want to talk about is learning the pharmacy practice model at your organization. Obviously, many of us who chose to do residency are wanting to up or improve and refine our clinical skills. We want to be that clinical practitioner that's super smart and does all these awesome things, right? Well, something that's also really important is the operational aspect of pharmacy. You can do all the fancy pharmacokinetics you want. If a drug does not make it to that patient, that it doesn't matter what your calculations are. So let me dig a little deeper into this. It's very important to know the whole med use process. What happens after a clinician or a provider enters a order into the computer. What happens to it when it goes to pharmacy verification? And then more importantly, when it goes down into central pharmacy, what all happens? Does a label print? Where does that label print? What is shown on that label? How do we know it's stat? Where does it go? Does that drug go into the IV room? Did it print to the correct location? Should a label even have printed? Those kind of operational things are very crucial, and I always find it difficult, for decentralized pharmacists to grasp the operational aspects and operational pharmacists to grasp the clinical aspect. It's almost like 2 different areas, and it kind of is, but to truly be a great pharmacist, in my opinion, you should have a very great working knowledge, or at least some baseline foundational knowledge of what goes on in both areas. And for residency, you all have the advantage of being in a learning environment and being in that learning environment for at least a year. If you decide to stay on or do another year residency, things like that. But you have this awesome opportunity to learn and really dive deep into the details of why we do certain things in pharmacy operations. Take advantage of that and learn as much as you can. It will serve you very well whether you stay within your organization or transition to another organization. The second thing is to be open-minded about learning different ways of doing things. And this is probably more applicable to 4th-year students entering rotations. And I just wanted to reiterate it because, for those of you who are entering residency, you're obviously very smart. You have probably come up with certain ways of doing things, and maybe we tend to get a little bit more stubborn as we enter residency. But it's important to be open-minded during residency and learn the different ways of doing things. For example, I remember rotating through rotations, and even as a 2nd-year resident, there were so many different ways to dose Vanco. They weren't wrong, it's just different ways of doing the same thing. So what I want to say from this is, and again, you guys probably, I don't know, maybe more stubborn or less stubborn, just be open-minded to how individuals practice in different places. I personally noticed a lot of difference in practice within, I was from Florida, by the way. I rotated through many different hospitals there, and within the different hospitals, they practice different. And then especially when you move out to the West Coast, I did my residency in Utah, and the practice was just so different. But I was open-minded to learning those different things. So the bottom line here is just to be open-minded about learning different things. Don't just shut something down just because that's not the way you did it. That's not the way you learned about it. Take it as all these different things, these different ways of practice. Take them soak it in, and then maybe there may be a time and place when you might pull that out and use that other way of practicing. The third thing is to start thinking about PGY2. And I'm not trying to push you to do a PGY2, and I'm not saying not to do a PGY2, but start thinking about whether or not you want to do a PGY2. And let's say you're interested in a specific specialty or multiple specialties, probably multiple specialties for most of you guys. Start thinking about second year. Mid-year is right around the corner. It's when I release this video, it's probably gonna be around July, so you only have about 5 months, and you wanna already be prepped for mid-year. So you probably have like 4 months. And what I wanna say with this is, start thinking about lining up the different specialties as rotations before mid-year. I'll give you guys an example. During my residency year, I had a hard time choosing between informatics and infectious disease. So I started to work with my preceptors even before I got into residency in discussing, hey, can I move some of my rotations like informatics and infectious disease to be earlier in my timeline so I can kind of affirm whether or not I truly am interested in this specialty. So that's just something to consider. Obviously, it's not always feasible, but some things to think about. And another thing is, I probably overdid it for this part, but during that first month of residency, I actually emailed a ton. I think I was doing one every couple days. I was emailing a ton of residency program directors for PGY2s, just asking them questions, getting to know them a little bit, asking them, do you have this at your program? Do you offer this? What are your thoughts about different things? Just engaging with different residency program directors to start building that connection. And I did that the very first month I started residency. So it was probably a bit of overkill, but for me it worked out. That first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is kind of slow, if anything, because you're still getting access, you're still being oriented. So I took advantage of that, and I spent a couple more hours each day to just look at other things, and that's one of the things I did. But it helped me really understand what I wanted to do going into mid-year, and it helped me a lot. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's probably the most important thing, and why I actually created this video in the first place, is pace yourself. Residency is going to be busy. I'm sure you all know that. And I wanted to highlight a couple things here. Pharmacy school was no walk in the park. It wasn't easy. It was definitely more difficult than undergrad. Residency is a completely different level. It's an entirely different beast. And I wanted to talk about some of the reasons why, so you have an understanding of what you're signing up for. I mean, I'm sure you all know what you're signing up for, and for those of you guys who are watching the video right when it's released, you've been through 1 or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. Woo, you guys got a lot coming to you. But that's good. It's a great time to learn and everything. But let me talk about some of the reasons why residency is a step up from pharmacy school. So the first thing is you have your typical rotations. The entire year is made up about different rotations. You rotate through different areas. You spend your 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. There's probably more hours, but let's say 8 to 5 and 9 to 5. Doing your rotation responsibilities, taking care of patients, doing topic discussions, working up your patients, all that kind of stuff. You're doing that in that period, okay? That's your normal day. Then every residency has a staffing component where you're working, as a pharmacist. You're doing a normal shift outside of your rotations. And that will make your 8 to 9 hour day turn into a 12 to 16 hour day. And then that shift is over, you go home, eat, sleep, come back and do it all over again. You do this for the entire year. So it's a lot of hours at minimum put into the residency. The staffing can also occur not only on weekdays, but also on the weekends. Obviously, you all know what that schedule is already because that's probably one of the things you looked at when picking out your residencies. But let's say you did on the weekends. Now you have 5 days, your Monday to Friday work week where you put in your normal hours. Maybe you staffed in between that too. And then you staff on a weekend, and then you go back to this 5-day shift. So you just work 12 days straight. And that's a lot of days. And sometimes things happen. Someone calls out sick or something like that, and you have to pick up another weekend shift, and it can just completely drag on to where you might be working 20 plus days straight, and it's not uncommon. So it is going to be a lot of time at minimum, just based on rotation and staffing responsibilities. It's not bad, it's great experience, but just something to keep in mind. And then another thing is some residencies have on call. So that precious amount of sleep you have, you could be woken up in the middle of the night. And I think one of the funny stories I've heard was like one of the residents who's on anticoagulation or cardiology rotation had to be on call for like bivalirudin or some of the other anticoagulants. They basically had to they got woken up every 2 hours every time a level came back, so they could, because the nurse would call them every 2 hours and say, how do we adjust this? They didn't have a protocol in place for nurse to manage it on their own. So then the pharmacist would wake up, learn what the level is, and make the recommendations on how to adjust the med. So a lot of things like that could happen on call, and that's just a piece of it. And then the other thing, which is probably the biggest piece of why you're busy during residency, and it's probably more so for pharmacy residents, because in medical residents, they don't have as much of this, is the projects. Don't get me wrong though, medical residents definitely have some, but I feel as though personally, this is just my own personal bias and opinion, pharmacy residents have way more projects than medical residents. Don't get me wrong here. Medical residents certainly have a lot of projects that they work on, but I feel as though most of their residency is focused on that experience, hands-on. They're performing a procedure, they're doing a thoracentesis, they're intubating a patient, they're doing things while they're there. Pharmacy has a lot of projects that are required to graduate from a residency. So these other projects, it's not patient care, it's usually outside of your normal hours that I just talked about. So you have like your MUEs, you have your residency project, you have data collection, you have other presentations that you're doing this entire year. So that piece takes a long time. And I think with that, it's really important to pace yourself. And there's two sides to this pacing yourself. Both of them are on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. On one end, you don't want to wait until the last minute to do them, because you're going to be doing a lot of hours in a very short amount of time. You're going to burn yourself out, probably pull a lot of all-nighters, and it's going to suck. These are requirements by ASHP, so you need to complete these projects to graduate. So that's one piece. Make sure you pace yourself, do a little bit every day, maybe spend like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, however time you need to kind of plan out how can you get all of these projects done by the end of your year. Your program will obviously help you, but part of residency is also to teach you how to manage your own time. You're gonna be swamped with a ton of things. You need to take the responsibility to learn how to manage some of your own time as well. So that's a key part of it. On the other end of the spectrum is not burning yourself out. I think a lot of pharmacy residents go through this. I guess like residents in general, a lot of people burn themselves out. They just do so much work and it's insane. I'm probably guilty of this during pharmacy school and residency, and it is not good for your mental health. So take the time to relax as well. I think for me personally, to give you an example, during probably the latter half of residency, when I started to really feel burnt out, I picked a day, and for me it was Friday 5 p.m. to like 11 p.m. or something like that, where no work was done, and I could do anything I wanted to. And at that time I was still really into gaming. Not to say I'm not into gaming anymore, but I would play Final Fantasy, I think it was like 15 or something, every day. Go home, get off rotation, turn on computer, and I'll just play. I was just like living in this fantasy world to get away from all the stress, and that was my relaxation time. And then the very next day, wake back up and I would work the weekends. that was not scheduled. I would just work the weekends, do projects, do topic discussions, and learn more so I can be better prepared for the week. So that was kind of long-winded to basically just say, pace yourself, and yeah, you'll learn a lot during residency, and it's a great experience and opportunity. All right, guys, I'll end the video here. I want to say again, congrats on getting residency. It's an exciting time, and yeah, make the most of it. How much you put into residency is definitely how much you get out. All right, I'm not going to prolong this video any longer. I wish you guys the best of luck, and I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in and watching the video. If you like the content, definitely hit the ImproRx button over to your left to subscribe, and definitely check out more videos over here to your right. Now, as always, if you have questions, comments, and even better, suggestions for future videos, definitely let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, until next time, guys.